Hi, readers. It's Lori. Welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper, or welcome if this is your first time. And welcome to my reading wrap-up for the month of November. I had a really good reading month in November. I read 8 books, which really surprised me. I think part of it was that I was more grounded in the month of November than I had been in a couple of previous months, just based on some life and work stuff. Also, I had a few days off in November, so I could take that time to read, and I don't know. And I listened to a number of them, so that probably also helped too. But I had a really enjoyable time. Now, before we go into what I read, let's look at the stats. And that means I have to pull up Storygraph. I'm going to have to get my glasses on so I can see what I'm doing. In the month of November, I read every single day. I have not been logging onto Storygraph as I should and saying that I read every single day or updating the reading. I just don't do it, and I don't really do it on Goodreads either. But the reason I know I've read every day is because I've been tallying it myself. And actually, because I've read Kindle every day, I'm on like a 68-day streak for Kindle, which is really lovely. And so Kindle keeps telling me, how many days I've read in a row. But I have been reading usually a Kindle book, a physical book, and an audiobook almost simultaneously all the time. And that has been probably part of why I read so many books this month. So I finished 8 books and I finished 2,260 pages. So some of those books were shorter, which may account for how I was able to get all this done, but that's okay. And the moods for this month were very eclectic. There were a lot of things that I chose for these books, which you'll realize in a minute why. The steadiest one was reflective. I had a lot of books that really made you think this month, and I appreciated that a lot. The next highest was mysterious, followed by informative, tense, emotional, and dark. So there was a lot of darkness in this month. And then the smaller pieces of my pie were sadness, relaxation, lightheartedness, inspiration, and they were funny. Some of them were really, really funny. So, and some of them were all of those things. So there you go. My pace was medium. 88% of the books that I read were at a medium pace. I felt like they were written at a medium pace, and I felt like about 13% of them were really, really fast. In terms of page numbers that I read, 63% of the books that I read were less than 300 pages. So I really, as I said, had more short books this month, but that's really okay. And it wasn't always planned that way. It just occurred. And then 38% of them were between 300 and 499. So I read no books over 500 pages this month, which is very typical of me. But one of my goals in the new year, spoiler alert, is to try to tackle some of my bigger books, especially a couple that are in a series that I would like to get caught up on. Fiction versus nonfiction. 75% of the books I read were fiction and 25% obviously were nonfiction, but I was happy to have participated in Nonfiction November and really read more than one book, which was great for me because that doesn't always happen. A lot of them fall into 3 top categories, which is thriller, literary, and historical, because I also read some books for Historathon. Then I had some dystopians, classics, magical realism, science fiction, romance, politics, mystery, history, contemporary, and autobiography. So it was a great mix of reading this month for sure. And most of what I read was print and audio this month, with 25% being digital. So I really kind of was tied in the print and audio categories, which I thought was also nice because I really do think that there are times where I can really get lost in a print book, more so than any of those other formats. All the books I read in the month of November were in English as the first language, But one of them was a translation, which I don't guess this registers. So that was interesting to me. And my average rating was 3.88 stars. So I gave two books 3 stars, one book 3.5 stars, three books 4 stars, one book 4.5 stars, and one book 5 stars. So let's see which ones those are, shall we? There is one book I'm going to share with you that I did not finish, but I probably will get back to, and that's Hampton Heights by Dan Coys. I am about that far in. It's a slow, slow read for me. I haven't quite caught the bug, but I'm enjoying it. So I'm going to probably try to finish that in the month of December, even though it's more of an October-y book. But I really do like it. It's very atmospheric, and it's a unique plot. And also, this might be part of it too, very, very small print. Bookmark drop. Yes, very, very, very small print. So that is also tricky for me because I need to go see the eye doctor again because it's time for him to say, hopefully to say, let's take that cataract out of your left eye, shall we? Yes, thank you. All right, I started the month off with a classic, and that was Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This was for a book club with some folks that I met at a bookish retreat, and we meet every month. And this one was our choice for November. And I have to say that I have certainly read this before, and I remembered lots of it, but there were some parts of it I was just really moved by in a different way than I would have been when I was maybe 14 or 15, whenever I read it. It was a required read for me in high school, which is interesting because this book currently is, well, it's always been at risk, I think, for banning. This notion of banning books is always kind of present, and it's certainly risen its head again. But I will say that Ray Bradbury has renewed the copyright for this book many, many times. And I know that he's probably doing that to preserve this for as long as possible. But this one is a classic literary novel, but it is about what could occur if in the future we have restrictions that would limit what we can do, say, read, all those things. So this book was first written in October of 1953. So this was kind of an interesting time to be reading it in the fall when it first came out. And I did listen to this on audio. I got it from Everand, as I remember correctly. So this main character in this book is Guy Montag, and he has been hired and is a fireman, so to speak, and he is tasked with burning banned books and maybe burning houses that are not following the rules. And the rules are essentially you can only watch certain television, and you really can't read a lot of really controversial books in their mind. And so Guy starts out, just carrying on with his work, and then he realizes that, he meets a neighbor named Clarice, and he gets some information from Clarice, some opinions from Clarice that are conflicting to what he's been asked to commit to doing. And then he begins this journey sort of to examine what's happening and whether or not he really believes that that should happen. There's also, his wife is also a pretty prevalent character in this book, and her story, I don't want to spoil anything for you. If you've not read this, I really encourage you to do so, but her journey is very interesting. And then he meets some other people along the way. And of course, he has some people that are coming and basically saying, hey, you need to do this. Don't forget, this is your job. Are you okay? Is everything all right? That kind of thing. So I really loved it. We had a robust discussion about this book, and it is, like I said, it's almost always been timely because there's always been a movement somewhere by a group of people or a person to destroy and ban books from people's reading shelves. So there you go. Highly recommend it. And I gave this one 5 stars. This was my 5-star read. Then the next book I finished really quickly is Conclave by Robert Harris. And actually, I think I gave 2 books 5 stars because I gave this one 5 stars too. I had just seen this film. We had gone one Saturday, as we often do, at least once a month, and I absolutely was riveted by this film. I've talked about it before. It stars Stanley Tucci, Isabella Rossellini, Ralph Fiennes. So it begins with the death of the current pope in his room, and the cardinals that are in leadership positions are called in, of course, and informed that the Pope has died. His room is sealed, and then, of course, the conclave begins, which, if you're not familiar with the Catholic Church, and I'm not overly familiar with the Catholic Church, but the conclave is over 100, I think it was 118 or 120 priests come together from all over the world to make a decision about who the next Pope should be. And this is often a difficult decision, and people kind of campaign for each other, and there are usually some inner people, cardinals, that are sort of rooting for one person or another. So but the process of it is really unique. But also the synopsis, of course, says, so you're not surprised, these are holy men, men of the world, and they have rivals. And over the next 72 hours, one of them will become the most powerful spiritual figure on earth. But there are some things that occur, and I don't want to tell you what, but I just can say this was incredible. I've never read Robert Harris before. I had never heard of Robert Harris before, nor this book, until I saw the movie, which I also highly recommend. But the book follows the movie very closely, as I said in another video. So you could do one or the other, or you could, like I did, do both. Also, last month, we went to a movie called Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. Also said when I saw in the credits that Claire Keegan had written this book. So I read Small Things Like These, which is a very, very small book. I read this, I know, in a day. This one I gave 4 stars. This one is set in Ireland in 1985, so it is, I'm sure, considered historical fiction. And it's about a man named Bill Furlong, who is a coal merchant, and he sells and brings coal to all of the homes in this little Irish town. And he has a wife and some children, and he's just struggling every day to kind of keep up with this work and to, I don't know, his character feels like a melancholy guy in the movie, more so, I would say, than in the book. Nevertheless, he finds out something that's happening in a convent, and he is disturbed by that. And so he's aware of what is happening or what might be happening, and he wants to figure out more and see what he can do about it. Very short, very well done. I would say I liked the movie more than I liked the book, and they do depart from each other. So there's that too. But so if you read the book, I think you would like the movie. If you watch the movie, I mean, I think you'll like the book because I did, but maybe there's some things that changed that I was kind of surprised about. I read The Scent Keeper by Erica Bauermeister, and the reason I thought it was historical fiction for Historathon was because it was billed as historical fiction on Goodreads. It has a number of categories, and historical fiction was one of them. But I loved No Two Persons, and so I really wanted to read this one too. And I had gotten it as a gift after the BookTube Besties retreat. It was sent to me as a gift, and so I wanted to get to this sooner rather than later. And I'm glad that I did. I gave this 4 stars as well. I didn't like it as much as I liked No Two Persons, but it was really fascinating. So this is about a man and his daughter. It starts out that they are living on this remote island, and the man is a scent keeper. He has a number of bottles that have scents inside of them, and he's been studying scents for a long, long time, and his daughter is learning more about them as well, and how to identify them, and what powerful kinds of qualities that they have, which I really found to be not so magically real, because I do use essential oils in my life for different things like lavender to relax. And there's some other oils that I use to kind of help me with congestion, which I've had to do recently. And so anyway, I'm a firm believer in the power of essential oils for sure. This one is a coming of age story, which I love, and it follows this girl whose name is Emmeline through her journey and where she ends up. And I don't want to say too much about it, except I really did find this to be entertaining. I liked the way that this moved and didn't move too quickly. I think she took great care to kind of captivate us and keep us connected to these characters very, very well. I thought that she did a brilliant job of both the plot development, but also the development of these characters. You like some of them, and at least for me, I didn't like some of them, but it was very, very good. And I am going to continually be an Erica Bauermeister fan. Also continuing in my fan club is Ragnar Jonasson. This one is a fairly new one, Death at the Sanatorium. This is not my first read by this particular author. This one was published in 2019, but it's still showing up as new in my library, so that's interesting. Nevertheless, I loved this one too. I gave this one 4 stars. It wasn't quite a 5-star read for me. I'm not sure what would have bumped it up, but it was well paced. I love one of the characters in this book who is Hulda, and I read a series of these. You can look and put it in the description box below, but I read a series of 3 books that had Hulda as character, and I have talked about these before. They were just so well done, and the way that he weaved this timeline and it was great. Anyway, it starts in 1983 at a sanatorium. There's a death of a person, and Hulda and her boss are sent to the sanatorium to discover what happened to that person. And the chief physician is also then found dead a week later. And there are a number of suspects in this particular murder. But then the boss says, no, this was a suicide. This was not a murder. Then in 2012, almost 30 years later, Helgi, who is a student and trying to finish his degree, he's getting a degree in criminology, and he is doing a research paper on this death that happened in 1983. And he's just interviewing the people that were related to this case to see if there was something more, because while it was ruled a suicide, there were some people on the force that didn't believe that the evidence was completely there. So he wants to look at this case, not to reopen it, but just to write a term paper or a thesis about it to graduate from school. And so he starts interviewing some of the people that were in the sanatorium, worked in the sanatorium, knew about what happened, to discover more about it. And what happens is, I'm not going to tell you, but it's really, really good. This is translated into English, and I really think they did an amazing job. The translator is Victoria Cribb. Well done. I really do feel like Ragnar Jonasson is one of my favorite authors. Do I pronounce his name correctly? Probably not, but I really, really like him. All right, then I read on ebook The Pumpkin Spice Cafe, which is the Dream Harbor series #1 by Laurie Gilmore. And this was one that people were popping around that they were talking about reading. Some people were reading it in their book club. It just kept showing up in different ways, and it sounded cute to me, and I found it easily on maybe Everend, maybe my library. I can't really remember. But again, I read it on ebook. It must have been my library because I read it on the Kindle. And I will say that I really did enjoy this. This was kind of a surprise for me because I don't always love these, kind of predictable little mysteries. So this is about a woman named Jeannie, and her aunt gifts her this cafe, and she's just kind of gone out of the job that she had before, which she wasn't particularly happy with. And she returns to take care of the cafe while her aunt is off in, I don't know, some kind of exotic location. And she's not certain she's going to keep the cafe at the beginning. She just really, is like, I don't know, this is a lot of work. Is this my thing? I don't know. So but she digs in, she dives in, and she lives in this little community now too. And then she meets Logan, who lives nearby on a farm with his parents, and he is kind of a handy guy. He raises goats and other animals and I think he brings her, does he bring her milk or eggs or something for the cafe? Honestly, it's a great book, but it's not going to stay in my memory forever for sure. But I really was entertained by this. And of course, you meet other characters and other people in this community. This one, though, I'm going to tell you is very, very spicy, steamy. It is, if you don't want to read a book about, people getting together and having a relationship that is very well described on the page, it's very open door on the page, this book might not be the most suitable for you, but I did enjoy it, and I really thought it was funny, and it was well paced and well written, and predictable though, and just like I said, kind of a campy little fall cozy romantic read. I guess a spicy cozy would be what we would call this. So I gave it 3 stars. I might would read the next one in this series. I'm not saying no to it, but yeah, I really thought it was fun, and it was just a nice sort of distraction from the heavier books that I had read this month as well. Then I finished one of my nonfiction picks I think this was a pick for the year, but definitely one that was on my list of nonfictions. I still have a bookmark in it, but my partner is actually reading it at the moment. So this one is by Kate Anderson Brower, and it is inside the private world of the White House, the residence at the White House, which the residence is separate really from the operational area of that space. And I absolutely learned a lot about presidents that I did not know. I gave this one 3 stars too. The way the author crafted it was tricky for me, and it's probably just me because I'm that person that likes things to be very linear and progressive, but it would go back and forth from one president to another and then back to another. It was just, and I understand what she was doing. She was sort of grouping things, right? Like she was grouping children in the White House at one point. So, I understand that. But some of it was just really hard for me to follow. I did listen to this a little bit too. I think it was also on Everand. So I didn't read it physically as much as I probably did in the audio version of it. But she really talks to a lot of people that worked at the residence and a lot of people who gave her information that I was surprised by, having worked for the government and having kind of known, those things. But a lot of them no longer work for the White House, so that, works out well. But this one is about Lyndon B. Johnson, obviously John F. Kennedy, Barack Obama, the Carters, the Reagans. Is that all of them? I'm trying to think. Is there somebody I missed? I don't think so, but maybe. But it really is more of the modern day, I guess, more recent day for the last several decades versus going all the way back to Washington. Although there are some references to how the White House was built and rebuilt and, different things like that happened in the way, way distant past. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed some of the information. I was shocked by some of the information. And I feel like I know a lot about some of these people, but there were some things that I was like, really? And some things I wasn't surprised about at all. It was entertaining, and I would recommend reading it if this is your jam, because it is quite something. It's quite a lot of information about people that, led our government for a long, long time. Is that the last one I have physically? Yes, here I am trying to reach for the last book and I don't have it physically. So the last one is another nonfiction pick that I wanted to read in this year, and that is Never Far From Home. This is a memoir by Bruce Jackson, and I gave this one 3 stars as well. Here's the trouble with memoirs, right? Like I always feel bad if I make a lot of comments about the memoir because this is their lives. So I really have no comment to make about his life. What I will say, though, is while I enjoyed this and I listened to it and read it on ebook, both formats, because I had gotten it as an ARC from NetGalley, which I was pleased to have been able to review and get off my NetGalley shelf. But it came out a while ago, so I was not swift in getting to it. What I loved about this book is that it really does champion this guy and how he moved forward from living in very difficult situation, neighborhood, in poverty, really struggling to get out of some of the culture of this place where he was born and raised, to excel in school, to really just kind of build this life that he currently has. So he went from living in the Amsterdam projects in New York City and having to get on the subway by himself and all those things that kids have to do, in big cities that they don't always do in places like where I live now. He then moved into being accepted into, where did he go to school? Georgetown. Yes. He continues to accelerate as an attorney, and then later he goes to work for Microsoft. He has some roots in music and in production of music and has some connections there. And then he, of course, begins to work as an executive at Microsoft. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot more about Bruce Jackson. I learned a lot about the culture of Microsoft and how they were and are with their employees, even though I know some of that now because I've had some clients from Microsoft. But I really am in awe of this story and how he really kind of overcame a number of obstacles that were in place for him to be able to have the life that he lives now and the family that he has now. So I really enjoyed it. I do recommend it. And it is available, like I said, at least it was available on Everand. And I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I picked that one. And I'm glad I got that off my list of nonfiction titles that I really wanted to read in the year of 2024. Did I read all of them? Oh, no. No. Okay, readers, that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you got lots of good books read in the month of November. I really did feel like I had a consistent reading month, which is nice because, I had a couple of slump months and toward the end of the year. And I know some people that I follow are still kind of slumpy. So I'm happy that this worked out for me. If you've read any of these, let me know what you think about them. If you want to read any of them, let me know that too. I know a few of you are reading or have read the Pumpkin Spice Cafe because it showed up on a lot of people's what I'm reading or what I want to read lists. But I really highly recommend you take a look at The Sanatorium and at Conclave because they're probably lesser known books. And The Residents, of course, and the Bruce Jackson are too. So I felt like I had a list of books that maybe aren't as popular, so maybe you hadn't heard of them before. So let's see if that's true in the comments below. Thanks again for watching, and as always, happy reading. Bye.